With that, I would like to welcome everyone to Passive House 101 series by the Passive House Accelerator. This is the show where we try to make it accessible for everyone to get into the Passive House train. My name is Jose, and I will be your host for the next hour. Today's presentation is 10 Steps to Building a Single-Family Passive House, presented by Josh Salinger. A brief intro about Josh and his firm. Josh Salinger's firm, Birdsmouth Design-Build, built the first certified passive house almost 10 years ago, and since then has worked on numerous passive house and high-performance builds in and around Portland, Oregon. At this point in time, building a passive house has become just building, as the transformation has become complete enough for Birdsmouth that it is hard to imagine designing or building any other way. With that said, I encourage you all, like Zach mentioned, to put all your questions in the chat, and I will cede the floor to Josh. Welcome. Is Josh on mute? Or
yeah, thanks. My screen was all over the place for a second. I was searching for my mute button. I'm better at passive house building than I am at Zoom calls, apparently. So, anyways. Thank you, Jose. I appreciate that. And thanks for everyone for showing up here. And thanks to the Accelerator for having me. Such a great resource. And, it's great to see so many people here. And I'm really excited to kind of talk about how, someone that's thinking about getting into passive house, building their first single family house, hopefully I can share some good ideas and some thoughts that are helpful to you all. So with that, just briefly, I founded Birdsmouth Design-Build back in 2008. So we've been going on now about 15 years or so. We do passive house and zero energy new construction, and we also do retrofits of the existing built environment. We're a mission-driven company, and our mission is to address climate change through the built environment. And so we do that through our practice of design-build, where we've got architects on staff along with a full build team. On top of that, I teach the FIAS Builders Training course. I'm part of Passive House Northwest, where we've got a conference coming up in 2 days, this Friday, here in Portland, Oregon. And also I'm an expert member on Green Building Advisor, and also contribute articles and content for Fine Home Building magazine. So just a little bit about myself and our firm. So with that, jump into these 10 steps. And I'm going to mimic some of the previous presentations where I reached out to a lot of people in my local networks for quotes and stuff like that as we go. So I'll be folding those in, and thanks to all those people for reaching out too. So, when I was thinking about, 10 steps and getting into building your first single family home, interestingly, a lot of the steps were kind of all before you actually start building. Because it's just so important to kind of create that base of knowledge and everything. So as I was thinking about this, it occurred to me that first things first, you need to be able to have good general business hygiene, right? And this is going to pay dividends as you embark upon your first passive house, right? So I often say that passive house is simply just a collection of best practices. And one of those best practices is also running your business. And so you need to be organized. If you've ever shown up on a passive house project site, it's usually really well run. It's usually pretty clean. And there's reasons for that, because that's what's going to make it's, again, best practice. And that's what's going to make this easier. So, you want to make sure that you've got yourself a good team on staff, or if you're working up with other trade partners and stuff like that. You definitely want to curate good relationships with those trade partners. You're not going to want to bring on a new plumber you've never worked with before. That kind of took the lowest price, because chances are you're not going to be able to have those resources and those relationships to be able to lean on them and hopefully educate them into what it means to build a passive house. Also, you need to know your business margins, and we'll get into this as we talk about how we get into setting up our contracts and stuff like that. We want to make sure that we remain in business, right? We need clear systems in place, good policies and procedures for your business. So as things come up, you can have a clear change order policy. We want to build more than one of these passive houses, right? So good business practices is important. And be profitable. profit's important, right? It allows for good working order tools, right? The ability to weather boom and bust cycles, unpredictable events, inflation, that's something that's happening now, weather, acts of God, all these things can happen on regular construction sites, but get these things in order before you jump into your first passive house. So step two is actually just getting your first passive house in the first place. I remember we built ours first passive house about 10 years ago. And a couple of years prior to that, I remember just talking about passive house to everyone I could see, trying to get our clients to bite, asking other professionals how they actually got their first passive house build. And I think what one needs to do is just commit to it, right? Like just really set a goal that you are going to be building passive house and work towards that goal. Take steps towards it, think about clearly how you're going to get there, right? You're going to want to adjust your marketing, right? Here's a little screenshot from our website where we put on the front page, that our mission and that we're trying to build zero energy buildings. And you put that front and center, right? To try to get people to understand the benefits of passive house, the amenities that passive house offers, right? So tune your marketing towards passive house and get to know the local players in your market. Markets all across the globe have a really great system or network of people that you can reach out to that have done this before. So do that. Go to local events. I know here in Portland, Oregon, there's all sorts of events happening all the time. The accelerator is another good one too. So go to those things and talk to your clients about the amenities of passive house, how they're comfortable, right? How they're durable, how they're going to last longer, how they're healthy with good indoor air quality, right? How they're resilient in heat domes or cold snaps, and also how they're efficient, right? So sell those amenities and get your first passive house. And then for number three, I was thinking, we need to have a good building science background, right? So understanding the why behind a particular decision. Why would you choose a particular WRB? Why would you choose a particular exterior insulation? Why would you choose a particular HRV or ERV? These things, you might just see these things on a spec plan if you're working with an architect, but you as the builder or someone that's looking to do this for the first time really need to understand what those impacts mean. And, also think about the impacts of value engineering on some of these things. So you might have some clients that are looking to shave dollars and they might come to you with a different window package after you've already pre-certified your building. And although that might be attractive, you need to understand the why behind that decision. If you're going with a window that has a lesser U value or has a higher solar heat gain coefficient or a lower solar heat gain coefficient, you might actually be throwing your project out of compliance. So we need to make sure that we understand the why behind all these decisions that are in these plans prior to getting into the actual building itself, right? And another thing that I find to be hugely helpful is to attend trainings, right? FIAS offers their CPHB, their Certified Passive House Builder certification. PHI does their Certified Passive House Tradesperson. Mariana Pickering from EMU puts on some really nice courses there. She was on one of these previous talks. Highly recommend checking these things out because there is some really great deep dives into the detail and the why behind all of these things that we're doing in passive house. Again, they're best practices, but you need to understand, where is our primary water barrier and why is it the underlayment and not the roofing, right? Why is that? And so once you understand these things and you reach out and you have some of these courses, they can be absolutely invaluable. I took that CPHB course about, 11 years ago or something like that now, and it really changed the course of my practice and my understanding. So highly recommend that. And then just marinate in passive house, right? If you've got local passive house buildings in your neighborhood, in your area, even if you have to drive a ways, go check them out. Go lay your hands on these things. Go see them first person, right? See if you can find a mentor. Is there somebody in your neck of the woods or in your network that could work with you on this? And pick their brains, right? Ask questions, be curious, like really get into the, why is it that we're doing this? Or how do I find that information? Those questions and asking those questions that mentor can be really helpful. and get to know product manufacturers. These people can also be super helpful. If you go to a conference and you show up and the SIGA booth is there, talk to the folks there. They're willing to help. This is a really great community. One of the great things about this community is that we don't tend to hold our cards close to our vest. It tends to be a very open and sharing community. And those product manufacturers are oftentimes really great resources to kind of understand this before you jump into your first project. So here's a quote from Scott Kosmecki, Portland, Oregon. He's got a company called Hinge Build Group, and he's got a panelized company called Resilient Framing Systems. And he says, give yourself a year or two to really study and absorb how the building science works, and then rely on your new friends to look over your plans when you think you are ready. I would never have been confident enough to build anything without the help of my network of Passive House friends, right? So he's recommending a year or two. So if you've got the time, spend a year or two, but take as much time as you can prior to doing this for sure. You know, here's another quote from Stefan Aguier from Green Hammer, another high-performance design build company here in Portland, Oregon, saying, bring in an expert who has done this many times before to provide feedback and assist with the details in the design, and ideally during construction as well. There's no need to learn by repeating mistakes others have already resolved. This is so true, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. Chances are there's been so many single-family passive houses built that whatever it is that you're bumping up against has probably been bumped up against before. And reach out to those people, reach out to that mentor, those product representatives, the local passive house group, the accelerator, whatever it is, and see if someone's already, bumped up against some issues like that before, right? And number 5, don't start with a moonshot. These are 2 images here. The top left is one of the first passive houses we built, and the bottom right is one that we built just a couple of years ago. And I wish I had done them in the opposite order. The top left was a highly articulated modern construction with an attached ADU that kind of went up and over, or the main house went up and over the ADU. And so it had a lot of jigs and jags and difficult air barrier details, and it was difficult to certify. And that's what I learned on. And I also learned that doing that, that might not be the best way to make a profit in these things too. Now, we made it through, and it's a great project, and it's one that I'm very proud of, probably one of the best buildings we've done. But this other one on the right was a 1,400 square foot single family home with attached garage, single story. And that thing would have been a great thing to kind of cut our teeth on, because this one was just manageable and easy, right? So, don't go with a Guggenheim to start things off, right? If you have the opportunity, keep it simple. It's the KISS, keep it simple. As Stefan would say, keep it simple, silly. I kind of like keep it simple, stupid. Anyways, a lot of feedback from folks in my network about this. Scott, again, from Hinge, keep it simple. As long as you keep the building form geometrically simple, it's not really that hard to pull off a single family passive house these days. I would agree with that. We're finding that our typical level of building, our just building, is meeting the passive house standard these days. Stefan, again, from Green Hammer, saying, the more complex the architecture, the more difficult it will be to ensure a nice continuous air and thermal barrier. If you see your air barrier weaving through framing and detail sections, you're likely to run into some challenges. That's a really good point. Check out those plans, check out where that air barrier is. And if you see a whole bunch of origami happening, kind of revisit that, think about that. Or if there's not really any ability to change that, zoom into that part of the plans and really get to understand it in 3 dimensions. So I think that's a really good quote there. Quickly, this is an example of a project we're building right now. On the right, we've got the rendering of this thing, and you can see that it's got different level roofs on it. It's got a porch that's kind of articulated out the front. It's got balconies on it. It's got a garage that's set back and attached, some different claddings, windows, and things like that. But when I exported the WUFI model on this thing, this is the energy model that we're using for this Fias build, it's essentially a cube, and it's just got that top corner just kind of clipped off. So our enclosure on this thing is very simple, but the actual look of the building looks more interesting, right? And so if you can, simplify your enclosure, less surface area to volume, less corners, less dormers, less bump outs, those are all places where it's going to be difficult to hit that air barrier target. You're going to get thermal bridging, and it's going to get complicated and expensive. So if you're thinking about your first single family passive house, try to keep it simple, right? But also try not to make it look ugly, right? But that's not something you want to do either. So here's a quote from Jeff Stern, architect here in Portland, Oregon, from In Situ Architecture. Keep the assemblies and the details simple, but don't forget about making beautiful architecture. I like to talk about like country songs. They're extremely meaningful, but they might only be 3 chords, right? So think about that with your buildings too, and maybe your first passive house building, is that just because it's simple doesn't make it not interesting or meaningful, right? These behind me and in this photo right here, some 11 homes that we designed about 3 years ago, Going Street Commons, that were very simple. And the point is to make that easy to build and cost effective. Yet I would argue they're fairly attractive things. This one I got a lot of feedback from others too, and I think is really important, is get involved in the design stage as early as possible. Early, really, really, really early. Like the clients, hopefully, if you're not a design build firm and you're working with a separate architect, hopefully the clients chose the architect and the builder at the same time. If you're thinking about building one of these for the first time, hopefully that architect or whoever it was, you all got in the room at the very early first conversations that started happening about this building. All right. We want to look for issues about constructability. There's lots of things that I've seen architects draw that can't actually be built. Like that gutter that you tucked in between the pergola and the house looks great, but how do we actually get it in there? There's no way to actually get a screw or a driver in there, right? These are things that builders can bring into this conversation that we need to bring into it. So constructability issues, look for efficiencies. How can we think about how we're going to frame this thing? How are we going to think about talking with our trades partners to bring them in early and have their expertise in here looking for efficiencies so that we're not getting complicated with the actual build itself. Look for products that perform more than one function. A classic example of this is the zip system sheathing, right? Where it's got your bulk water control layer, it's your vapor control layer, and it's your structural sheathing, and it can be your air barrier. It's all in one product. So as opposed to separating all those things, there may be good reasons to do this, and we have done this in other projects, but for your first build, maybe keep it simple and just kind of look for those products that perform more than one function. Also, as you're getting into those plans and thinking about it, always zoom out, zoom out, zoom out. And if you're starting to get into a whole bunch of complex origami and you're starting to get into some really complicated conversations about details, there might be a better way to do it. Maybe you need to zoom out and say, you know what? Maybe if we just make this overhang a little bit bigger, we're not going to have to worry quite as much about this water flashing detail right here, so we can simplify it. So always zooming out. And that's something that I'm doing constantly with our team, is just like making sure we're looking at it from the 30,000 foot view. Draw your air barrier on the plans. It's a really good idea if you can put your pen down on your piece of paper and draw all the way around the entire building, up and over the roof, down the sidewalls, across the windows, to your foundation connections, without ever lifting that pen off the paper, and making sure that you are making a continuous air barrier. Do that in your architectural set. Don't do that in the field when you're sitting there building the thing. It's too late. Same goes with HVAC. Draw out and design and engineer your HVAC prior to building. Do that during design. And hopefully you're doing that in coordination with the structure, so you're not running into a pipe that needs to go through a structural beam. Maybe you can switch to a parallel cord truss so that pipe can get through the beam. Maybe you could think about, if you're using TJIs, shifting that pipe over towards the middle a little bit more so that you can cut a bigger hole in that TGI. So working with your structure and the infrastructure at the same time during the plan stage, so that when it comes time to build, you can just execute and you're not getting caught wasting time and money and ending up with a less well-performing building. So here's a picture of our team, kind of just drawing things on the board, having conversations, thinking about improving details. And this is from a quote from Allison Kwok from the University of Oregon. Get your builder, your mechanical team, your client, and your CPHX together as early as possible. I got a lot of these comments from folks. And one of the things that we're doing here is just drawing out the 4 control layers, right? So we want to talk about where is our bulk water control, where is our air barrier, where is our vapor control layer, and where is our thermal control layer. And we're mapping this out and trying to find efficiencies and easy ways to build this and get this done cost effectively with less materials and less labor early on in the process. So this one, interesting chart. So the blue line, number 1, is the ability to impact cost. You're going to be able to impact costs on a project in the early stages of the process, and it gets more expensive as you go further down the line in time. Number 2, the red line, is the cost of design changes. It gets more expensive to make design changes the further you go along in time. Number 4 is kind of 3 is the traditional design process where you kind of have that curve kind of coming up. And what we want to do is shift that curve to the left by starting early so that we can make those changes to the design when we have the ability to really impact cost and simplicity and efficacy of these passive house buildings. So shift that curve to the left. Number 7, don't start in a hole. Don't bid low to get the job. I know it's tempting for the builders out there, the architects out there, the professionals. You might want to get your first passive house, kind of under your belt, but don't do this to yourself. It's not good for our industry. It's not good for you. It's not good for the long term. It is true that this might not be your best margin project, but make sure that you are making a margin and you're making a profit, like I talked about earlier, right? There's definitely a learning curve. There's a classic quote in the passive house community, there's your first passive house, and then there's everyone after that. And now that we've built close to, 8, 9 of these things, it's just become building. It's just what we do. And it's not really any more difficult. You really wonder what was so difficult about it. But there will be a learning curve the first time you do this, and understand that. Add time to your contract for, delays beyond, your control. There might be European products that get delayed in shipping. You might need some extra time for fixing your air barrier after that first test if you didn't quite meet the metric. You're going to have to probably spend more time quality control with your trades partners in their work. All that stuff is going to take a little more time compared to traditional construction. So give yourself time for that. And don't be penny wise and pound foolish. I see this happen quite a bit with people that are doing this for the first time. And I see them spend way more time and effort and don't end up with a product that's as good because they decided to cheap out on a particular product or system or something like that. So, here's something from Skylar Swinford. For those of you that know him, you understand the blacked out little box there. But, on someone's first passive house, I wouldn't say mess around with the ERV HRV. Use Zender's turnkey ventilation system. If you can't afford it, you probably shouldn't be building a certified project and should instead be applying the cost associated with certification towards the Zender system. An example of the penny wise, pound foolish. If you spend a little bit more on the system, it will work for you. You're not going to have to go back and problem solve. The install goes a lot quicker. They give you really great design. They'll put on your plans where to put all of your exhausts and supplies and what CFMs to attribute to those particular rooms. And so they do a lot of that work for you. So it is a little more expensive, but you're going to get a lot for it. And if this is your first time, you may want to consider something like that. This is from Tessa Bradley of Artisans Group. She says, I see builders either spend so much time on the passive house bits that they overshoot the performance goals, which is admirable. But for me, I would want just over the certifiable limits to me, this means that I got the best house I could without overspending on my construction budget. So I think what she's trying to say here is there's no need to break air tightness records here, especially on your first one. You don't need to roll that tape out 6 times and sit there with a magnifying glass to make sure you've got every last thing. Get it to the point where it needs to be. This is building. Make your test, get through it, right? You can waste a lot of time and effort, and especially on your first build, it's very tempting to really get into those details and really, kind of make a bespoke craft of your air barrier or something like that. If it's your build and it's your dime, maybe go for it, right? But if it's on a contract for somebody, it might not be the time to do that. Unknowns, step 8, we're on to 8. So known unknowns. So there are things that we know that we don't know, right? There's things that we don't know that we don't know. I think this is actually a Donald Rumsfeld quote. The only good thing that guy ever did. Came up with a good quote. So, don't get surprised. In the first passive house we built during the final inspection, it was a FIAS project. The rater said, okay, cool. It's time to test your hot water. And I was like, what do you mean test the hot water? I had no idea. This was 10 years ago. You have to be able to raise the temperature of the water 10 degrees from the furthest fixture from your water heater within a half a gallon of water. I had no idea. And so we walked over to the sink. They got out their half gallon, jug, put the thermometer underneath the thing, turned it on, and luckily it raised 10 degrees before we got to that half gallon. And I was just like, oh my God, I had no idea. So nowadays we're designing this. We're actually making sure that we're mapping it out and we're doing the calculations to make sure that we will meet that, because you will fail. You will not get your certification if you fail that thing. So, work with your rater, work with your mentor, get to know these things. Let's say, hey, what don't I know? Right. That's going to be super important. Another project we had, you have to meet these, for FIAS anyways, you have to meet these prerequisites of WaterSense and Indoor Air Plus and Energy Star. And as part of that Indoor Air Plus, you can't use any added urea formaldehyde products. And so the rater got into our cabinets and was like, oh, these cabinets, I see they're made out of plywood boxes here. Is there any added urea formaldehyde in there? And I had no idea. So we had to dig into that work and ask our cabinet maker where they got their plywood from. And it turned out that it didn't have any formaldehyde in it. We made it through again, but don't rely on luck, right? See if you can, look into the guidebooks, the certification guides. It's all there. It's worth reading through these things before you get going. And definitely get pre-certified. An acquaintance of mine decided he was going to do passive house after he already started building. Never stood a chance, not even close. If you can, get pre-certified on these things so you can work out all those kinks ahead of time. So on to step 9, be strategic. You really got to have good project management, right? You got to have good schedules, work out a Gantt chart, good communications between your team and your clients and your trades, have the software in place, know your budgets. Good project management is going to make for a good first passive house build. Run a clean job site, right? Have job site meetings, do them often, do them with your team, your trades, whoever it might be. Post signs on your job site, right? There's a classic one right here, the airtight building, right? So report all damage to the building supervisor. Put those things up so people can see it, so that your trades or whoever, the plumber's helper who just got hired last week shows up and does, the most dangerous tool on a job site is the utility knife, right? Someone could just slash your air barrier. If they don't know this, if a plumber is like, I need to get in there because I have to make a connection, they're going to use that utility knife. So make sure that you're posting these things and make it obvious for people. Trades as education, right? Maybe you could send your staff through that, certified passive house builders training course or whatever it is. Get them educated before they show up. And, document changes, maintain records with photos. So easy nowadays with, everyone's got their little rectangle in their pocket. Take pictures, document all this stuff so that, you know, if something comes up later and your rater says, hey, did you insulate this rim joist over here? You can be like, oh, here's a photo of it, right? So Alex Botzel from Earth Advantage had a quote. So the best advice I can give is pre-construction meetings. Have them often and on site. Everyone always thinks, I've been on the site, I know everything, but every time we conduct a pre-construction meeting, something comes up that made it worth it. I would echo that. I think I found the same thing. Scott Gunter, he's a project manager for Don Tankersley construction here in Portland, Oregon. I think he's one of the best project managers and builders I've ever met in my life. Says becomes systems oriented and focus on installations that are scrutinized from beginning to end. The last 10% of each task will be the hardest to achieve, but will also have the most impact on your final result. So I don't think this is to say like, you know, spend all your time and, you know, make a bespoke air barrier like I was talking about before, but also just be strategic and think about these things, know what you have to do, execute that well, and be efficient with it, right? And 10, for some reason, my photo didn't come up here, but I had a really cool photo. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, all right? It's back similar to what Tessa was talking about. QC your HVAC. This is something the HVAC, especially for single family, oftentimes folks aren't used to running even manual J calculations, much less running it through a passive house software and then getting checked for your homework, right? So QC your HVAC hard. This is going to be one of the biggest challenges with your first single family home is going to be HVAC. You would think, well, I don't know of any other industries that know less about their craft than HVAC contractors, especially when it gets into like high performance. Now, that's not to say that there's not some really great ones out there. And if you can find those, lean on them, but you're still going to have to QC them. Usually the biggest mistakes I see in first-time single-family passive house has to do with the HVAC system. That's one of the biggest reasons for failure. So QC that. Oh, that was my photo. Is a sheath. Let me see if I can go to the next. Oh, there it is. The really cool thing, if it's your first project, is just to sheathe directly over your windows and doors and everything. Here's a picture of this. I'm forgetting the name of the method. It's a guy who did this for the first time. I'm blanking at the moment, but they're actually taping the entire air barrier over their windows and doors and all the punched openings and everything like that, and then testing it to making sure that it meets it, so that when they do cut in the windows and they test again, if there's an issue, they know that, oh, it must have been our window install. So kind of an interesting way to do something for your first passive project. So Blake Ballou from Ballou Homes down in Salem, Oregon, said to have a proper air sealing mindset, as it's almost entirely ignored in conventional construction. Super true. We frame all of our buildings in-house at our company, and we talk about air barrier first framing is how we talk about our style of framing that we're doing. Get into that mindset of thinking about air barriers all the time. Jeff Stern again from In-Situ. Incorporate enough tolerance in your performance goals and the actual construction to allow for mistakes that will inevitably occur. True. Like if your energy model says you'll meet passive house if you reach, 0.03 CFM per square foot or 0.3 ACH50, and you have to, in your first one, get less than 0.3, that's not a great strategy. Make sure that you're pre-certifying that thing at 0.6 or 0.06, whatever flavor that you're going for your passive house certification. So that gives you flexibility to make those mistakes that happen even on the best experienced project sites. It's welcome to the world. We work in the physical world and we work with humans. Things are going to happen. So give yourself that flexibility, especially on your first passive house. And so a couple of quotes, Blake again, air behaves like a fluid. Prior to insulation and drywall, it helps to walk through the house, scrutinizing the exterior envelope and imagining that the interior volume of the home is filled with water. Are there any leaks to the outside, especially at intersecting planes and materials changes that need to be addressed that won't otherwise be later dealt with by a separate air barrier membrane, etc. Before you insulate, before you cover, test. It's going to be a requirement through Passive House, but you're probably going to want to get a blower door or get a friend with one and test it often at that stage while you can still make changes at that stage. Because once you cover that up with insulation and drywall, you can't get back at that air barrier. So Skylar again. So on early Passive House projects, I lost hours and hours and hours of commissioning ERV, HRV systems with poorly conceived and executed duct systems that also had noise issues as well. Yeah, great point about the noise. If you don't get these things right and the static pressure right and your diffusers and all that stuff, they will be noisy. They won't deliver and you could potentially fail. Back to like what I said earlier, the biggest source of failure I often see, besides not hitting the air tightness goal on first time passive houses, is the HVAC system. So get to know your HVAC. And I'm going to turn it up to 11 here. I know it was 10, but I'm going to 11. I'll be quick about it. Make sure you job cost afterwards. Build institutional knowledge for your team, yourself, your local trades, and your local region. Post your mistakes, share your mistakes, and tell others. So in that spirit, here's a mistake we made. On the top left here, you see that little flap, the floppy bit, kind of going, this is the top plate of a house that we're building right now. We set the trusses on that gable wall, and we forgot to put the air barrier underneath and over that top plate prior to setting that gable end truss right there. So we had to pry the thing up and shimmy a thing, our air barrier beneath it to get it right again. So, spend the time to make sure that you're putting that stuff on over your top plates if that's the route you're going for your air barrier. But I think it kind of exemplifies that point. Post your mistakes. Hopefully people will learn from that. And, one of the great things about our industry in the passive house world is that people are open to this. And I think it's really valuable to share these things when we get the opportunity. So thank you.
I don't know if you can hear my applauses, but it was a great presentation. Thank you, Josh. I just want to add a couple notes. So basically to your whole presentation, I could gather that it's just nice to, step back, assess, talk to the team, be patient but effective, and just go ahead with the plan and keep the communication and the teamwork going through the whole project, because otherwise you're never going to reach the intended outcome, right?
Yeah. As I was tasked with this to come together with like 10 steps, I was surprised. I originally thought like, oh, it's all going to be about like, details with the actual build and, little tips and tricks and stuff like that. But as I seriously considered this and sat down with it and thought about it, it really went to that, like communication, pre-construction, working with your team, and all the stuff that I think it took over 9 out of 10 of these slides. And it made me realize, it all happens ahead of time.
Yeah, no, man, you said it right. And 11 steps, I guess you're missing a couple more that you couldn't put in there, but yeah, it's really good information to have. And just a couple more notes on my end, at least. So I like that on step 1, you just start with the collection of best practices. And that's something that Mariana mentioned in her own presentation. I think it was in the number 2 of the 101. So that's kind of the name of the game, right? Passive house is just it's kind of like a kitchen recipe. You have your 5 ingredients and you have to just, use them right. And then you get a nice dish. So, I think it's a way to discuss this stuff with, especially clients, people that are not technical, to try to break it down like that. And it's pretty obvious that you're going to keep them a good building anyway.
Yeah, I really like that way of looking at it. It's like we all endeavor to do as best as possible. And if you just happen to do the best with all the different steps of building a home and designing a home, it turns out that passive house meets you, right? We're just trying to do best practices, and that's what passive house is. And when you think about it like that, it really works. And also, like, once you learn how to do something right, you can't do it wrong again if you're a reasonable human, like as soon as you learn the science behind why you do something and the why behind those decisions, you learn how to do it better, and you can't go back. And then passive house just happens to meet you. I've been saying lately, like our typical building we've been finding has been meeting the FIA standard lately. We're not really shooting for it. We're just plugging it into the model, and it's like, oh yeah, sure enough, our typical building is meeting FIAS now. So it's like, it's come to meet us.
That's great. And one last note, is it true that you work from a train car?
Oh, yeah. Our offices are in a converted 1950s rail car that used to be the Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, rail car, commuter car. And so they're parked across from the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, and we've retrofitted it, and our offices are in a train car. So yeah, we build zero energy buildings out of a train car, and I have a bird on my logo, and we're in Portland, Oregon. So we're literally like a Portlandia joke. So.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. When I was researching a little bit about your company, and it just, just made me laugh, but in a good way. Like, you're really making it happen. Doesn't matter where you are. So I guess there are no excuses for anyone's practice at that point.
Yeah, might as well have fun with it, right? I mean, it's like, this type of building is way more fun. If it was just building buildings for profit, for money, that's boring. This is interesting. It's got meaning. Do it out of a train car. Do whatever. It's more fun that way.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you save money on rent, I guess. It's a little smaller footprint than a regular building, so it makes sense economically as well.
Win-win.
All right. So I think we can hand it over to sponsors and then go to the Q&A.
Hi, I'd like to give a big thank you to the fine organizations that make our work at Passive House Accelerator possible. First, a big shout out to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you, too, to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingui Architects, Glavel, Minutair, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewiso, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, Proseco, and Source 2050. And thank you to our patron sponsors, Brennan, Coltraco Ultrasonics, Euroline Windows, Holstrom System, Inotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, Owens Corning, RDH Building Science, Sanderson Sustainable Design, and US Engineered Wood T-Stud. Thank you, sponsors.
Awesome. Well, my name is Kim Davis. I'm the programs manager here at the Accelerator, and I will be helping to facilitate the Q&A today. So thank you all for your questions. We probably have room for one or two more, so feel free to drop them in the chat. Before I start the Q&A, I'm just popping in a construction tech episode that Josh did last year with us, which was really awesome. One of our most popular videos of the year, so worth checking out. First up for questions, we have what is driving your sales, and wondering if it was energy issues or others. I think you touched on it a little in the presentation.
Yeah, it's been changing over time. A lot of people are coming to us now with indoor air quality stuff. And that has to do with, certainly COVID, right? And wanting to get fresh filtered air inside their buildings. But we're here on the West Coast in Portland, Oregon, and summers have turned into just kind of smoke season around here. And, you get into July, August, September, and oftentimes the air quality is just terrible outside. So we've been having a lot of people approach us wanting to be able to live in a house where they can breathe and not smell smoke and get those smoke particles filtered out. That's been an interesting thing that we've seen a lot of our sales driven to, because like I mentioned earlier, with a lot of our marketing, we put that forward. And our base level of building is, essentially Passive House. We have a lot of people just call us already asking for it, right? Saying, I want zero energy or I want Passive House. And we're like, okay, well, who are you? So that's over time that's happened. But I'd say those are some of the things with the indoor air quality, the smoke, the viruses, certainly we've seen that become more of a thing of late.
The smoke is what I was trying to get at there, Josh, because my daughter lives in Portland. And so that's kind of what I figured you were going to say. So thank you.
Cool. Glad I was able to read your mind there.
Hi, sorry about that.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I am here. No, my question was quite specific about the, I think it was Xander system you mentioned, and I wonder if there was a model number or something that we can reference. There seem to be HRVs and ERVs on their website, and then many different products. So I wonder if there's something specific you refer to.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, there's the Q model. There's the Q350. That's kind of like the larger single family. They also make a 550 if you're getting a bigger home. Are typically the ones that you'll see most often in single family homes. But that said, Zender offers a suite of different ERVs and HRVs and smaller ones, ducted ones, wall hung units, all sorts of stuff. So it really depends on the specifics of your particular project.
Okay,
But
great. Thank you. We'll explore. Thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Graham Irwin. I think you had a couple comments, questions, maybe just pick the best one.
I don't know if I have a question offhand, but Josh, what an amazing presentation, and like so full of practical advice and also poetry. Like I can't
Graham,
wait to
poetry. Wow.
I can't wait to hang out and talk at length. So hopefully at the next conference, but amazing. You made my day. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Appreciate that.
Graham had a comment too about kind of I think you called it the poor person's blower door. If you want to talk about that for a second, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously need calibrated. Why am I telling Josh this? But I'll share it with everybody. You obviously need calibrated blower door tests, but you don't need a calibrated blower door running through your entire air sealing process. You can do that with a box fan on a piece of plywood, and you can just pressurize or depressurize the building and use a smoke pencil or listen for leaks or whatever. And that's just something cheap and easy. And if it gets destroyed, it's not that hard to replace. So you don't need to run a blower door test every day, but you could run this thing every day. And I defer to those that actually do this in practice. It's just something I've seen in the field that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I like that actually. It's more of a diagnostic thing just to go see where you're at versus like a measuring tool. Whatever you got to kind of get the air moving in there and just see where those leaks are and do it as often as you can. So totally.
Awesome. Okay, next up we have Sandra Lester. Are you still here?
Hi there, Kim. Just a quick question about your project management tools, Josh. Just wondering what you use and if you like it.
Yeah, we have a few. What I found with these things is like there's a number of different options, and they're all really good at some things and not good at everything. So we kind of just picked one ultimately, and we use Builder Trend, which does decent job for scheduling and stuff like that, but does a really nice job with like daily logs and photos and stuff like that. It does an okay job integrating with our QuickBooks. We use a separate software for it's QuickBooks Time that integrates into that too. And we also use just, believe it or not, some Excel spreadsheets, because like it doesn't matter which one you're looking at, Box, or you're looking at Builder Trend, or you're looking at Procore, or whatever these things are. Like I said, you might find Procore might have like the perfect time tracking thing, but it's not as good with the finances or whatever. I just haven't found one that works for all. So we've gone with Builder Trend. It works good for us. We've modified it where we can, plugged things in, and then still relying on the occasional Excel spreadsheet.
Great, thank you, Sandra. Next up, we have David Ernest. Are you still here? Would you like to come up and ask your question?
I am. Thank you. A couple of questions real quick, and I will tell you, I've been planning my house as the homeowner for over a year and a half, and educating the local talent in this concept has been a ride, to say the least. One of the questions I do have, though, is I do want to at least build to the point where I can eventually certify the house as passive house. How can I get those steps as the owner? And then the second question would be air barrier between the layers of, as I'll call it, between the top plate and the structure above. Is that necessary with the WRB sealed on the outside?
Okay, well, I'll take the last one first, I suppose. Like, it's going to depend on the particulars of your climate zone, the type of building, so on and so forth. But what I will say is that the most common areas of air leakage on a typical house is the top plate, followed by the bottom plate foundation connection. And then after that, it's going to be your punched openings like your windows and doors. So you always want to focus on the biggest areas first, and that is that top plate connection. And one of the ways of doing that is you simply take your exterior sheathing, because you put that sheathing, as you mentioned before, kind of within the layers. So if you have your drywall here and then you've got your insulation, then your sheathing can be your air barrier. And then maybe you have your WRB, your air control layer, and this is also your vapor control layer. Outside of that, maybe you've got some exterior insulation, or you've got maybe it's a TJI with a Larson truss, a million different ways to do that. Putting that air barrier in the middle is going to protect it really good. And I find that to be really effective, and we almost always do that. But coming over the top plate, you somehow have to get over the top of the house, and houses usually have overhangs. And so how do you get that around that overhang over the top? And so that can be tricky. So what we end up doing is just taking that membrane. You can also use a rip of plywood or something like that, and you put it over the top plate prior to putting on your trusses or your roof rafters. And then what you do is you're on the inside now with that air barrier. It comes up your sheathing, goes over the top plate. Now you're on the interior, and you can run that either along the bottom cord of your trusses, or if it's a vaulted ceiling, you could go up the bottom of your rafters, and it just transitions from the inside to the outside. So it's a really easy, quick, cost-effective way to get a really tight air barrier and deal with that spot. That's the number one source of air leakage on single-family homes. In terms of being a homeowner and trying to do this for the first time, I would get your team together as soon as possible, get them all in the same room, listen to them. They're smart people, right? Listen to your plumbers, listen to your electricians. If you can afford to get them through some sort of training or something like that, just get everyone in the same room, start talking about this stuff and talking about your project, figuring it out on paper before you start actually building.
Thank you so much. And thank you, David, for the question and for being here. It's great to have you. Looks like we have one more question. I will say too, it's the top of the hour. So if anyone needs to go, we understand. Feel free to add questions. We have a little time left and a great resource here. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. Next up, it looks like we had more of a comment from Mark Tard. I don't know if you had more to build on that you wanted to talk about. If you'd like to come off and mute.
Yeah, I was just actually interested, Josh, are you a design build firm?
Yes, it's Birdsmouth Design-Build. So we've got architects and designers on staff working in the same office as our build team.
Okay. It's interesting because we are not a design build firm, and so we have this extra layer, and I guess this is just general information for everybody, but we have this extra layer of integration that we have to do with our design team because we don't have that in-house. So we, in a certain respect, we're sort of having to reinvent the wheel every time, at least of that aspect of a passive house. But what we are doing is we are developing a particular process of flow to help integrate that. Because oftentimes, there's many times we don't necessarily have an architect that is passive house savvy or even understands that. So we end up having to take the lead on all of that, where it seems like you have that all integrated because you are design build, and it's a much more replicable process for you.
Yeah, we got frustrated with having to educate architects every single time we'd get their plans. And what happened was like, we would get kind of pigeonholed as being expensive for green building, because it's like we'd be adding stuff into it that they didn't have before, or we'd be a headache or a problem or whatever. And it just was falling to pieces. And so we eventually said, enough, we're going to just bring architects and design on board within our team. And, what you get with that is this institutional knowledge, kind of like what you were just saying, like you have to start all over with the next architect you get. And being design build, you get that built up institutional knowledge so that it just becomes building and designing. And it makes it way more efficient. And I can only recommend considering going to design build it's a big lift. I get it. I did it. But if you can, it pays dividends. I actually wrote an article for Fine Home Building magazine about exactly this. So if you want to get into more detail, I would refer you to that article where I kind of get into it there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I don't know that we're in a position to, because of our pipeline. So we basically bill ourselves out as a design build partner, and we won't take a project on unless it's in basically at schematic design, because then at that point we feel like we can affect those important points on Passive House, and also the budgetary points that are related to that. But it definitely has its failings, I suppose, or its difficulties. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it can be done for sure, and that's why I get back to like getting everyone on board as soon as possible. And in that article, I talk about that too. Like if you're just not in a position to move your company's format the way you deliver buildings, that's understandable. That's a big lift, but get in there early. But the one thing you do miss out with that, though, like you were saying, is that institutional knowledge. It's always going to be a new architect or something, and you're like, here we go again. I'll have to explain this.
Right.
It can be done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. I put the link, Josh, you can double check me, but I'm pretty sure I got the right article in the chat there. I had one message come in through DM asking, and this is a big question, asking what would be the cost difference, generally speaking, between a regular build versus a passive house or standard net zero house, in your opinion? Or experience?
The answer is, and this is where I've been meaning to reach out to the adult diaper company and see if I can get sponsored, because I say it so often. It depends. Like I want to get a T-shirt, from the adult diaper company, and that'll be my new logo. But it's going to matter if you're building a pancake-shaped building with the view to the north on the north side of a hill inside of a forest of fir trees. That's going to cost a lot more than a kind of two-story, more cube-like structure that's got great solar access and the ability to orient it, right? So the premium for the first one is going to be significantly more. And in fact, we're building two buildings right now that are exactly that. One is a pancake with the north-facing glazing in Portland, Oregon, amongst a bunch of trees. Our walls are 18 inches thick on that one. We're building another one, the one I showed the example of with the Woofy model with just the cube with the corner clipped off. That one has 8.5-inch thick walls. So the cost difference between those two is huge. And they're both our firm in Portland, Oregon, right? And so it depends. So that said, I'll jump into multifamily building. I think there's you get into multifamily, and I think it can be either zero cost premium to get the passive house, or 2 to 3%, something like that. So I think there's some big levers when you get into multifamily. Now I realize this is about single family. And I typically say it could be anywhere between 5 to 20% more of a premium to get to single family. It really depends on all those things. And it goes back to being able to do this stuff in design. That 18-inch thick pancake house that we're building right now with the thick walls was actually the exception that proves the rule. It's from a third-party architect, a good friend of mine who we're building that for, but we did not get the opportunity to get in there early in design. And we're seeing them spend a lot of money to reach the passive house standard. So, if you can do it right, you can get a fairly small cost premium, but then I immediately would turn around and say, okay, well, even that cost is going to be paid for itself over time, right? So it's kind of short time frame thinking to look at those first costs versus the total cost of ownership of a really high quality building made with best practices. And on top of that, you're getting a lot more, right? You're getting that filtered air during those smoky days, right? You're getting on the heat dome that was here in Portland, Oregon. It got to 116 degrees last June. We had a client who had a passive house. It never got over 85 degrees in there. without their AC on. So these things become survivable and resilient, right? I mean, there's all these great amenities that go along with it. So it's a little bit, it's strange to talk about the premium when you don't also talk about the value that's coming with that and the specific situation. So the canned answer is, maybe it's 5 to 20% on a single family home. But again, adult diapers, it depends.
Thank you, Josh. Totally understand. All right. One more question just came in from, let's see, Jeff's iPhone. Jeff, are you still here? Like I can ask the question. I think this is about retrofitting, asking about using passive principles in existing buildings, saying that especially in the Northeast, they have a lot of old structures, boilers, things like that, and just what your thoughts are on retrofits.
Yeah, save the hardest one for last, right? That's a big tough one, right? Existing buildings are really difficult. It's hard to turn a 1972 Yugo into a Tesla, right? So yeah, we actually started a retrofit division at our company, and I'll plug our podcast, the retrofit podcast, that's through Green Building Advisor, and Ryan Shanahan, who's on our team, basically is talking about retrofits and not pretending to have the answers, but really just trying to have the conversation, because it's something that a lot of smart people are spending a lot of time thinking on right now. And there's no like golden solution to these things. It's really site specific. It's very situational. And you can't let the enemy be the perfect be the enemy of the good with these things. You got to do the best you can, because you can spend a lot of money very quickly on these things. So do the best you can based on a site specific and situational approach to that retrofit. That's why they're tough. They're inscrutable. It's like, I wish I could say, oh yeah, use the energy sprung system where they'll just like put panels on the outside of your building and super easy. But what if you've got a, Victorian gingerbread house? Like that doesn't work, So it's a tough one. It's a long conversation. FIAS is doing some really fascinating work with their retrofit standard that they're actively working on right now. So I encourage you to check out. They recently had a symposium or kind of conference webinar on their retrofit podcast that is recorded. Check that out, and you can dive into that a little bit deeper. Can be done.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Actually,
Hi, this is Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that response. And it's from what you just said, it really suggests a sort of subset of best practices that are sort of organized in a way much like, a combat medic would approach something, triage. You got really basic skills, tourniquets, sucking chest wound, cauterizing, stuff with chemicals. You got some basic techniques and tools, but then the sky's the limit. Every situation is going to be different. So it would really seem beneficial to have not only practice training, but the application of some sort of reference that sort of draws on the basic skills principles and says, okay, here are the ones that seem like they would get the most bang for the buck in this particular situation. And if anyone's out there kind of doing that, that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, interesting analogy, and I think it holds true, right? Like it is kind of like triage, and you still have to know what you're doing, right? One of the first things we do with retrofits is we'll shake down the existing house or building with an audit, so that we can figure out, get a blower door on the thing, an infrared camera, go through the systems, write them down, figure it out, and what is that biggest bleeding, right? To use your analogy, and address that first, and that's really what one can do.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Josh. All right, I know, Josh, you have places to be, so we are going to wrap it up. I'll hand it over to Jose for final thoughts. And I'm also going to put a link to our mailing list in the chat, so you can just stay up to date with events that we have going on. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Josh. It was actually it's a really good one today. And I would like to invite you all for the next one, which is going to be 10 steps to designing a multifamily passive house. So thank you, Josh, for the segue there on one of your answers. So everyone have a nice day, and we'll see you.